number 10, which is going to be and is Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, I believe is the way you pronounce that, starring Mike Faced, I believe. Let me check. Yep, Mike Faced, Zendaya, and Josh O'Connor as the triumvirate, the trinity, the love triangle that is featured in this movie. It was the whole kind of crux of the film. The very, very warped and codependent triangular relationship that these three people have, and how they seem to be inextricably linked, even through intense dislike of one another, even hatred of one another, even changing opinions, changing paths, through the flurry of youth, and also the wisdom of growing up a little bit and realizing that maybe the people in your life are a bit more toxic than you realized. It's kind of the basis of this whole story, and really surprised me that I like this much. And I've really just been going back in time, so to have a movie from this year come out that I enjoyed so much was a great surprise to me. I thought that first of all, the soundtrack was great. That's been getting a lot of praise from other individuals, from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who make up Nine Inch Nails. It's got this like techno, synth, electronica, industrial vibe that they're known for. Although it's not as harsh as something like Nine Inch Nails music, but that just courses through the whole movie. I love the main theme and how they keep bringing it back, using it in various situations. And obviously, maybe not obviously, but this movie is filmed in a very asynchronous structure, or achronological. Sometimes to the point of a little bit of jarring whiplash and confusion. I think some people have issue with that, but I really enjoyed how that kept imbuing that central tennis match, that final tennis match, with increasingly more tension and meaning as we kept kind of clawing back these moments from the past and contextualizing that final match. And I thought that the three leads were really great. Because there's not a weak link, they all rose together and somehow still became better than the sum of the parts, which the sum was already great. So yeah, that's my number 10. Next we have number 9, which is The Godfather, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, released in 1972. This is obviously a behemoth in the film history. It's one that, if you haven't seen it, it really damages your street cred in terms of being able to talk about movies intelligently. And so I knew that eventually I was going to watch it, and this year was the year. And as you can see, of the 44 films that I watched, it is my 9th favorite. Its reputation precedes it, so I won't belabor the point, but I thought that it was excellently constructed. I did like the first half more than the second half, but that's only to say that the first half was some of the best movie watching I've experienced, and the second half was merely great. But yeah, everything up to like the McCluskey Sollozzo hit was just excellent, just excellently structured and paced, excellently acted. Every character was someone who I could envision. I understood their role. I understood their strengths and weaknesses, what they wanted out of the situation, their motivation. Just crafted to the nth degree, just lovely. And probably my favorite moment is during that McCluskey Sollozzo hit, when Michael comes out of the bathroom, and you think, okay, he's gonna come out and he's gonna whack this guy. He's gonna take that pistol out that he just retrieved from the bathroom. He's gonna pop this dude. I love the decision that he doesn't kill him right there. There's still a little bit of hesitation for Michael, but he sits down, and then for him to stand up again and take it out and just obliterate these two made that scene just even more, holy crap, what just happened? And obviously it's probably going to happen. That's the whole plan going into that evening. but when it happens, it's incredibly tense and riveting. And yeah, I thought obviously Marlon Brando is indelible, left an indelible mark through movies like this, and Al Pacino is in his bag. But I mean, really, everyone across the board, just excellent. At number 8, we have Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, released in 1979. Once again, this is a big boy movie like The Godfather, where if you haven't seen it, people are gonna look at you a little bit sideways. So I'm glad, as I was with The Godfather, to finally get it under my belt. And I've actually watched it twice this year, which I can't say for any of the rest of these. Yeah, all the rest of these I've only watched one time. Alien I have watched twice, so maybe that's an argument for it being higher up. But actually, if I was going off my first viewing, this probably wouldn't make the list, although I still liked it. It was that second viewing that really finalized my feelings and ratcheted up my opinion of it. And yeah, it's great. Such a great piece of atmospheric world building, just atmospheric filmmaking, set design especially. That is really probably my favorite thing about the whole movie. It's not the tension, it's not the alien, it's not any of the actors, it's the ship, it's the Nostromo. And the fact that we start the film out with that slow crawl through one of the hallways of the ship, immediately establishing a sense of place, a sense of setting, and then how it crawls through, and then we kind of go up onto the console. The camera kind of pans up and over to the console with the pilot's seats and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden the computer kicks on and we hear the whirring of this like half digital, half almost analog type machine. And I love that aesthetic that kind of covers the whole movie, is this like high tech but like lo-fi and analog, that kind of 70s 80s era punky feel to all of the environment, which is obviously only then increased with the alien itself and stuff like that, just like in a different way obviously. But yeah, that's what I love about this movie, is that I just love looking at it. I love looking at all the little details in the scene. It's the same way that I feel about Blade Runner, and I think Ridley Scott seems to have this ability to work alongside people who he knows are going to bring so much character just to the sets and how they're constructed and composed. And obviously, the alien is such an iconic creature. Once again, an indelible mark on cinema. And Sigourney Weaver is a delight in more ways than one. But it is another movie where I think I do like the first half better than the second half, when it's more focuses on the alien. I do like the build more than the release. But once again, that's still only to say that the second half is merely great to the first half, which is some of the best that I've watched. Number 7 is The Blair Witch Project, and this was directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, released in 1999. And this is actually one that I have covered on the channel, one of my few other videos, or a couple other videos. There's only been 2 other ones. You will not see Halloween on this list, which if you've seen that review, you'd know why. But The Blair Witch Project, which I watched after Halloween, floored me. It rocks, which was such a surprise to me because I thought it was a total meme. I thought that, this was something that people only made fun of. I was not aware that it was actually one of the best constructed horror films that I've seen. Talk about tension. Talk about horror. Talk about atmospherics. I've never seen them done better than in this movie. And granted, I'm not exactly a horror film aficionado. In fact, I'm quite a neophyte, as I am with films broadly. But this one, I would be surprised. Not that wouldn't be surprised if something topped it, but I'd be surprised if it was totally outclassed by another movie that I watched. The fact that we never see the witch is such a smart thing. Obviously, I think part of that was just the budget for the film. But that's the great part about tight budgets and small productions, is they force creativity and they force approaches that seem to give greater latitude to ingenuity and creativity. And this movie is that in spades. I thought that the three leads were great. Maybe I was a little bit annoyed at some of the characters at some points with some of the screaming and maybe slightly overwrought tension, but not really. I only say that to maybe add some credibility to my opinion. Otherwise, I'm pretty much totally effusive about this movie. I think it's just great. And that final encounter in the house is a perfect encapsulation of the movie. I've seen some complaints that they don't like the way this movie resolves, but I think that it is tonally pretty much perfect throughout and encapsulated in that last, those last few moments. So that is number 7. Number 6 is Brief Encounter. And this was directed by David Lean. It was released in 1945. And this is actually the first of the 5-star films. Those first 4 were 4.5 stars. This is the beginning of the films that just absolutely blew me away. And yeah, this movie is great. I think this is one of the first movies I watched that were kind of older, at least from this like foray into film, and made me realize that the best movies, they don't really age. Sure, there might be things in the dialogue or things in the setting, characterization, but in terms of what they're about and what they mean, they're just as fresh as the day they were made. And this is no different. Just an excellent romance film, deeply poignant, a tragic story. It's one of those doomed love stories where you know that almost certainly it's never going to work out between the two parties, these two individuals that meet randomly and realize that they love each other, that seemingly they're made for each other. And what do you do when you think that you've already met your soulmate and yet you meet someone who it may actually be your soulmate, to the degree that something like that exists, right? And I love that it's about the woman's just innate tension and how torn she is over this new reality that's come into her life, and she's frozen almost by this, not sure what to do, because to her knowledge she's never felt love like this, and neither has he, and they're both in committed relationships, and so it's, I think people could see this as like some tawdry film that's trying to glorify infidelity or glorify adultery, but that's not what it is at all. It's a meditation on love, and the forms that it comes, and how like love doesn't necessarily know those bounds, and that doesn't mean that we have to act on all forms of love, but does mean that love is sometimes messy and it's not easy, and it puts us in positions where we have to make choices, and ultimately these two make the hardest choice, which is not to be together. So yeah, great movie. Number 5 is It Happened One Night. This is an even older film than the last one. This was released in 1934, which is crazy. Such an old movie. 90 years ago? Wild. And this was directed by Frank Capra, who also directed It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Arsenic and Old Lace. This is the rom-com in the sense that it's, to my mind, the prototype. And it feels so fresh. It's insane because it is that prototypical rom-com with the third act kind of drama that comes up, and then the amenable resolution that we've all grown accustomed to. And yet, it being the first one and it's still feeling so fresh, it's just this deep paradoxical nature of the movie for me as a viewer, where I don't think it's been done better than this. And I was just absolutely adoring this film the entire time I was watching it. Every scene had immense amounts of charm. I mean, Clark Gable is magnetic. He is a true movie star, and Claudette Colbert is beautiful in this movie. the way that she plays her role and the way that they play together. You know, that kind of age-old story of kind of enemies to lovers. It's done really well here. And just so many charming bits. I can think of, you know, when they're hailing the taxi, you know, hailing, kind of hitchhiking on the side of the road. Or the bit where they're stowed away in one of like the roadhouses or whatever, and like on a, you know, highway side motel, and they play at being like husband and wife one morning, like I think it's been a while since I watched it, but just so many charming moments and bits like that that just had me smiling the entire time. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. Don't be put off by its age. You know, still just an excellent piece of filmmaking. Number 4 is Speed Racer. This is probably the one out of any of these that would draw the most ire, I imagine. This was released in 2008 and is directed by the Wachowski sisters of Matrix fame. This is a very polarizing movie from everything that I've read, and I just happen to be on the positive side of it. I do think I might lower the rating to maybe a 9 out of 10 rather than a 10 out of 10 like I have it now. But when I watched this, it was the most exhilarating movie I've ever seen. Some people call it, you know, Technicolor puke and just like vomiting color and lights and things like that, and I don't think that they're even wrong, but for me, I was dazzled. Like, every one of those racing segments just this was my face, just like, they have the greatest kineticism, just kinetics and frenetic activity that I've ever seen. The way that they keep that energy for every moment of every one of those races. I just wish there was more races, honestly. But the way that they keep that high energy the entire time is so just creditable to them and their filmmaking, and the way that this is edited, and obviously the way it's animated. It's deep usage of, heavy usage of, you know, CGI and other methods like that. Yeah, it's a deeply campy film. Absolutely. Writing is very hammy, very, very corny in a lot of ways. But a lot of it worked for me. A lot of it played these big moments really well because it just played into the cartoon nature of the film. And some of the more campy moments actually struck a chord. I remember the part with Matthew Fox where he's talking to Speed Racer, and Speed Racer at this time, I don't think, knows that that's his older brother who's had a face change or something. I thought that part was pretty stupid, and he says, you know, something to the effect of like, I don't know what you're gonna do, but I just can't wait to see. I can't wait to see who you're gonna become. I can't wait to see what you're gonna do. And I'm gonna be there watching, and it's gonna be a great privilege of mine to be able to do that. And that's totally not verbatim at all, but the way that moment hit me, like, actually really resonated. And there's some moments with Speed Racer and John Goodman, his like dad, where those also kind of really resonated. I was very surprised. And so that was something that didn't take away, but it was really the racing segments that just floored me. I know I use that phrase a lot, but it seems very appropriate in this part here. I get people not liking this. I can see all the different segments or all the different qualities that I like that people might not like, and I can recognize that. But for me, my 4th favorite movie that I've seen this year. And then at number 3, we have Babette's Feast. Talk about a change up from the last film. This is a Danish film directed by Gabriel Axel, released in 1987, and it is a pure art movie. Like art film. We just went from a campy schlock, pulpy cartoon explosion of color and noise to a deeply ponderous and slow-moving, slow burn character piece, philosophical film. So you can't blame me for not having a diverse sense of taste so far, at least. These 2 movies are a great example. But yeah, this one really, really worked for me. I can imagine for people coming to this film, and I will forewarn you if you do want to watch it, The first hour is slow, but for me it wasn't a bad sort of slow. It was a type of slow that I was still deeply engaged with. I don't know that I could tell you why, but I just found the setup interesting enough and the characters intriguing enough insofar as we're exploring them that um, that I was engaged. I do have a Christian background, and so this movie is very much about a cloistered Christian community, very strict religious opinions and practices that go on here, and how this French housekeeper, who is a cook, comes into that as a refugee. They accept her in, and she kind of revitalizes this community. It's also a movie about not just how she changes their lives, but how they accept her in and give her a home and give her a place to stay. And in some ways, how she's reciprocating that through something that she loves, which is food. And then I just absolutely adore the last meal. That's really where the rubber met the road with this movie for me. I mean, I enjoyed it up to that point, but that's really what makes it my third favorite, is the way that last dinner kind of rolls out. And yes, it's about the beauty of the food and the process, and about Babette's care for these people through food, but it's also about this community realizing that God has more for them, and that there's no sense in adding these extracurricular rules on top of themselves, extra biblical rules, but that food is a way that God imbues the world with beauty, and especially community through food, and how we gather around the table, and how we join with one another, and how that meets us with happiness and joy. And that final speech, one of the final speeches by the soldier at the dinner table, really kind of encapsulates that. It goes from this repressed state of being where all these people engage in this meal, and they slowly are chipping away at the hardness of their hearts, and by the end they're all filled with mirth and joy, and they're singing in the night. I thought it was lovely, and spoke to some of my background. This movie, means so much. Number 2 is Jaws. That's right, 1975, Steven Spielberg. Yet another movie that I really don't need to talk much about. Those people that know it, you know it by heart. It's a movie that you watch a billion times. I've only watched it once, but I'm looking forward to a future of watching it repeatedly, because I just thought this movie absolutely kicks ass. I have watched Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time this year and did not love it. I liked it fine, but this movie, I thought was the perfect marriage of blockbuster big action with character work, dialogue, and pace. It just married everything so well, and I adored it. The three leads are impeccable. We have Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, just absolutely kill their roles. Hooper was the first character that I fell in love with in this movie, but quickly Quint and Brody join the fray as well, in terms of my just admiration and love for a character. And nowhere is that clearer than in the night when they're swapping stories and scars and singing shanties. And when that transitions into Quint's, wartime monologue, I thought all of that was just pitch perfect. And earlier in the story, it just imbued the story with a lot of heart when we met Brody's kids, especially that scene where one of his sons is at the table, and he's mimicking Brody from his periphery, and Brody's just kind of in a stupor from the hell of a day that he's had, having just, had to deal with the kid who has just been eaten alive, and all of that, and how the boy is like mimicking him, and then Brody realizes this and just turns to him and starts to just like, have a little father-son moment with him. That was just lovely, and happens early enough in the movie that it imbues that character and this story with so much grounded warmth and character. And that's why it works, is because it's not just some big monster movie, which can be fun. It's more than that. There's something underneath it. There's a content that grounds the entire affair, And especially bringing Hooper's character into it, it also gives the story a lot of naturalistic content and veracity, right? It's almost believable that there would be a great white this territorial and this aggressive. Obviously, it's still ratcheted up to 11 for the movie, but it's believable enough that the whole thing has this air of real tension and real horror, and just great. I can't wait to get back to it and for it to be a movie in my rotation for many years to come. And finally, number 1, this is Sweet Smell of Success. Released in 1957, directed by Alexander McKendrick. It's so good. It's probably my favorite movie of all time now. Granted, I've only watched it once. Granted, I only watched it a few months ago. But it's going to be a tough one to beat. This was just made in the lab for me. It is so dialogue heavy, which is my jam. I love Tarantino's films for that same reason. Things like Pulp Fiction, just they're infinitely quotable films. And the way that dialogue informs character and vice versa is my favorite sort of filmmaking. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to approach a movie and a lot of ways that I enjoy having a movie be approached by a filmmaker, but this is probably my just natural self's greatest joy when it comes to a film. And this movie has the sharpest screenplay I've ever witnessed. You could damn near quote the whole movie. Every line that leaves a character's mouth is just dripping with noir energy. This thick noir lacquer just swiped over the whole thing. It's only a little over 90 minutes, and it is pacey. There's not a moment where I felt this movie dragging. And I also really appreciated some of the camera work, some of the editing. There's a couple shots that just elevated what was already excellent on the page, elevating it even more through filmmaking technique and formalism, things like that. It's just great. We have Tony Curtis from Some Like It Hot, as well as Burt Lancaster in this film, and they are formidable as the leading duo of this film. Burt Lancaster as J.J. Hunsaker, this newspaper columnist, kind of magnate, is terrifying, deeply compelling, riveting to watch. And then you have Tony Curtis playing this seedy press agent trying to weasel his way and grease palms and sacrifice humanity for personal gain and social status in 1950s New York in the publishing newspaper publishing business. The way that he brings that to the fore is wonderfully terrible. There's a scene where he literally whores out one of his friends to get another columnist to do a hit piece on someone else, because the whole premise is that J.J. Hunsaker has Tony Curtis's character Sidney under his thumb, and Sidney knows that he's got to do his bidding, got to do Hunsaker's bidding if he wants to get anywhere in this world. And Hunsaker has this weird kind of vaguely incestuous, although one-sidedly incestuous relationship with his younger sister, who has recently entered into a relationship with this other kind of jazz musician. And JJ realizes that she might actually love this person and doesn't want her to be taken away from him. So he gets Sidney to try and break up this relationship. Otherwise, he's not going to publish any of Sidney's clients' pieces in his column anymore. So he has that kind of leverage over him. And so it's about how Sidney basically, like I said, tosses caution and humanity to the wind in order to do whatever he can to get into Hunsaker's good graces and, establish himself as like the press agent to go to, and I'm sure eventually, hopefully, be a columnist himself and all of that. And this all just absolutely disintegrates into, a pretty terrible denouement for all these characters except for the sister, and it's beautifully gross in that way. And like I said, sharpest screenplay I've ever come across. Just whiz bang, like just jazzy and incisive and caustic and terrible. It's great. I can't recommend this movie highly enough. That's it. That's the top 10.